What is up, YouTube, and everyone checking this video out? Today's video is specific to frame repair and how an amateur like me can fix some rusty frame rails on a classic car. So I don't claim to be a pro, but I'm gonna show you what I've done and the progress I've made so far. So hopefully it'll help some of you guys out when fixing your classic car and if you run into a similar issue. So I acquired this 1965 Ford Galaxie probably a year ago, and believe it or not, I drove it to my house. Currently it's ripped apart. The interior was actually done. I had it reupholstered since I was like, let me jump ahead of this since I know I'm gonna be working on it on and off. So the interior stripped, I got the seats reupholstered, I got all the door panels ready to go in. But you can see that I have the body off the frame. And from what I read, doing this on a 1965 Ford Galaxie is not the easiest thing. But I started upgrading the suspension in the rear. I was upgrading the suspension up the front. I was doing disc brakes. And while I was under the car, I ran into this problem. I ran into some frame rots. So the smaller piece right here was from this side, and those two longer chunks were from the opposite side. And that is all the dirt that came out of that frame. That was on just this side. Look at that chunk. Look at this. That thick of dirt was sitting inside of that frame. And there's actually a lot more dirt right there. So I'm not sure where the car was situated, but at some point in its life, someone decided they were gonna park this thing somewhere, and it just accumulated a ton of dirt, probably never dried. The water ended up rotting out the frame. So, I mean, this is pretty substantial frame rot. This is completely compromised. You can see how easily it bent. This stuff is really thin. Look, I could probably bend this with my hand. But that was, that's not good. So when I was under the car doing all these upgrades, trying to get it safe and sound to take my family for a ride and cruise around, I noticed I had to fix this problem. So this is where I'm at so far. I'm not a professional. I don't claim to be a professional. But I'm making this video so it could hopefully help some of you guys out. A couple of the tools I used. Some straight bar, some heavy gauge steel, just so I could get my edges straight when I'm measuring. So I clamped a couple of them to the lower portion of the frame and the side frame just to get my fitment correct before I tacked. I made an interesting tool out of PVC pipe. So, what size is this? 1/2-inch PVC pipe. And I drilled a couple screws into the end. So once I have my hole cut out there, I just rammed this thing down in the frame and kind of agitated it a little bit back and forth to get all the loose dirt out. And then I used an air compressor, stuck it in one of the drain holes in the back and blew all the dirt out, which is all the dirt you see there. Hand grinder, angle grinder, a light because I was working kind of late, some pliers, and a simple welder. And this is what I have so far. I got my patch panel in. I don't know if you would call it a patch panel or your piece of frame that you would replace, but anyhow, I beveled all the edges, tacked it in. It's very straight. I don't know, it's hard to see it, but I cleaned up all the edges, and that's that. So I use these clamps, I guess these grips right here, in order to get the middle straight. You take. And this is another reason why you have that heavy gauge steel. You use your straight edge, and you can see, like, if you're straight. Same thing with the bottom. hard to see it, but pretty straight. So once I got that squared in there, I put a few tacks on the front, on the bottom, and on the inside. So I climbed under the car and was able to throw a couple tacks on there. I'm kind of amateur when it comes to welding, so I may have a friend help me out, but this is what I got so far. Hopefully this information helps you guys out, because I find value in watching YouTube videos, and I need to be more conscious about making YouTube videos. But I'll show you the other side of the car that I got done. This side is actually substantially larger than the other side, but once this is all like welded in, I'm gonna feel a lot better about taking people for a ride, because it was kind of scary to see how bad the frame was. And again, you take your flat stock, and I don't know what this is. Maybe it's not 1/4 inch, but you know, there you go. That's damn good, you know, on all sides. So that's how I was able to get my panel to fit. And one of the things I noticed, because the frame was so compromised, I think I tried to jack the car up and the frame just started to like taco, and the outside wall was kind of out a little bit because the bottom portion was tacoed up, and I was a little worried. But metal has memory, so once I cut out this patch completely, the frame went back to being kind of flush, semi-flush. But I mean, there's no kind of difference in this wall. There may have been a slight deflection in the middle outward, but that's why I had those little clamps or those grips. So I just put a clamp underneath on the back side and on the front side, got my stock in here and just cinched it down. Not tight. I wasn't trying to kill the middle. I just wanted to get the original middle flush with my new patch, and then I would put a tack in. So it's hard to see, but there's no, that's damn good, you know. So again, this is almost 2 feet. The other side I think is about 14 inches. I went 2.5 inches up. The stock I was using was 1/8 inch square tubing. This is the stuff I was using. I don't know if it makes a difference, but the steel, I think most steel has like a seam where they get the square tube out of. I decided to not use the seam here. This is actually a piece of the steel that I cut. You can see where when they manufacture the steel, there's a seam, right? Because I'm assuming it's flat stock and eventually they mold it into a square. Well, I decided I wasn't going to use that just because it's one more thing to get compromised. So I decided on both my pieces I was cutting it off. Something else I would recommend, you can kind of see how much heat got into this piece of metal because it has an arch to it. So the piece of metal actually like arches because of how much heat. So I had an air compressor handy, and I would do a couple passes with my grinder, and then I would just cool it off with the air compressor. Just do a couple cuts, cool it off, because I don't care too much about this piece. I cared about the piece I was installing on the car, so I didn't want there to be a lot of warpage. This one didn't have a lot of warpage, but you could still kind of see there's a little bit of a warpage right there. So a little bit of an arc, not too bad. But just helpful tips. Hopefully it helps you guys. So again, I decided I was gonna cut off the seam. So I actually have a full C-notch. So you only have a seam on one side. So I had all steel on the bottom, steel on the other side. That's that. Hopefully once I get to welding these, or my friend gets to welding them, I'll be able to assemble the car and get it back together, because I am anxious to drive this car. And I'm a Chevy guy, so I never thought I'd be having a Ford in my garage. Got my 67 Nova right there. I got the little pickup that I need to fix a couple of the shackles. My shock shackles broke. And then I got a diesel. But hopefully get this thing working right. Hopefully get that thing working right. So hopefully you guys learned something today. Hopefully I was able to help you guys out a little bit. Once I get it assembled, I'll make another video, show you guys what it looks like fully done.